Hello, welcome to my shop. Today we're going to be doing a complete rebuild top and bottom end on this YZ250 two-stroke. Also included in this video is a modification to the shifting, the shift detent spring inside here that will cure the false neutrals that some of the faster guys get, or the lazier shifters get, where you go to shift, let's say, to second or third or third to fourth, and you get caught in between the two gears and it feels like a neutral. Or if you catch neutral on accident quite often when you're going from first to second gear, this pretty much cures that stuff. And it's a modification right underneath this cover right here, and we're going to be discussing that as we're doing a rebuild on this 2021 YZ250. If you don't want to watch the full rebuild and you want to get just to the modification, if you look down in the description, I'm going to put at what part of this video that modification is done. You just go right to that, see what I'm doing, and you can make this modification on your own bike without removing the motor. You just have to remove that cover. It's really easy. The only part you'll need to do that job is just a gasket for the cover, a new gasket for the cover, and that's it. But this one has a locked up motor. Again, it's a 2021. It belongs to a friend of mine, Alex. I've known him since he was a kid. I think he's about 21 or 22 now. He rides this thing real hard, and we'll discuss some of that stuff a little bit later in the video. I already started to pull the motor out, and then I realized I wanted to make a video on this, so I'm just going to run you through the stuff that I've done so far to get the motor out, and then we'll get the motor out and get her on the healing bench and get to it. So the first thing I did was, obviously, I removed the seat and I removed the tank. Alright, and I loosened up I removed the bottom subframe bolts here so I can loosen up the carb mount, and I removed the full exhaust system. And by removing the full exhaust system and removing the bottom subframe bolts here, I was able to pivot the subframe up on the rear. You leave that bolt in, you just swing up the rear, and with this loose right here, and you can pop the carburetor off right here, so you don't have to take the carburetor off of the boot. All you have to do is just loosen the subframe and prop it back, and that'll disconnect the carburetor. You could do a top end like that if you wanted to do a top end, or to remove the motor. That way you don't have to mess with the carburetor. It just sits right there. Another thing I already have done is remove the cylinder head. On some of these bikes, the cylinder head will make contact with the frame right here, and you can't get it. You can't quite get the cylinder head out. Mainly that's from 2011 and on, when they changed to the low compression head or the European models. For them bikes, if you have a hard time getting the head off, all you have to do is remove the engine mount bolts and loosen the swing arm pivot bolt, and allow the engine to drop that tiny little bit that'll drop when you remove these two bolts, and you loosen that one, and that's usually enough to get the cylinder head off and out. And of course, I did remove the mounting brackets right here, the frame mounts or whatever, the motor mounts for the cylinder head. And then drain the coolant. This bottom 8mm right here that has the washer behind it, that's where you drain the coolant. You just remove that, take the radiator cap, pop it off, and she'll flow all her coolant out. So that's what I've done so far. Now I need to continue pulling this thing out so we can get her on the bench. Oh, I gotta show you guys this. Check out that air filter. I don't know if it has any room to flow. I mean, maybe a little right here. That's about, that thing is so caked. He says, oh, I didn't clean it for the last 2 rides. He rides over here at Sandlot, and I was like, well, you got to clean it a little more, at least every full day's ride. And if you're riding a sand track, guys, you'll block all your flow. And luckily, it looks like he had enough oil that no dirt got in, but yeah. Got to get these frame guards off real quick. Okay, now I'm going to remove these 2 covers. Wow, it's been a while since it's been cleaned out in this cover. These OEM covers, they have a vent on the bottom that's built into the gasket right here. And you can buy some of the aftermarket covers like Boyson and stuff that are aluminum that completely seal this off. It's not a bad idea. But if you're going to use the OEM covers, which I use the OEM covers, I'm okay with it. But you got to take these apart or take the cover off every so often. Maybe spray some WD-40 in there and blow it out with high pressure air and just get all that mess out there if you want to keep it clean in here, which you should be. Alright, now I gotta remove the clutch cable, so let me come up here and loosen this all the way up to free up some cable to help that out. Alright, got that loose, and you got this little tab right here. Let me get a light on. You just bend that up, little safety tab. Sometimes these can be, even with it loose, sometimes you got to give them a little bit of help, pushing them up. There you go. Pull that out of the hole, set that aside over here. Now let's pull this gasket off. There we go. Alright, now we got to get that flywheel off. That takes a flywheel puller. It's a special tool. I mean, you can probably pull it off with other pullers, like, you know, but yeah, it's best to use the right tool. Alright, I'm going to knock this off with the impact. If you don't have an impact, you can buy a special tool that locks up the teeth between the main gear on the other side of the motor and the clutch, or you can even just jam a flathead in there and lock them up and allow you to wrench on this side. But I like using impacts for this stuff, and at this point, if you're wrenching on dirt bikes, you should have some type of impact. And then here's where the special tool comes in. You can pick these up anywhere, Rocky Mountain, you name it, eBay. They turn opposite to get them on. Like lefty is now tighty. This one's, oh man, this one's been around a little bit. Here we go. She's going in. You want to get a decent amount of threads in so you don't strip it out when you go to hit it. I've had it happen to me before. Oh, wrong way. Simple as that. She's off. Alright, like I said, I'm not sure if I mentioned, but this bike is a virgin. And you can see the timing marks there. Like in the one video that I had, might be real hard to see, but it is ever so slightly retarded. See the timing marks? If you haven't caught that video on a free mod, the timing marks on the free mod for the YZ250, well, there it is, another one that's come slightly retarded right from the factory. All you gotta do is just run through my videos. You'll find it. It's called YZ250 free mod. So now what I'm gonna do is just unbolt the stator, because I have two options. I could follow these wires all the way up here, disconnect everything, and remove the motor with the stator on it, or I could take the stator off and leave it all this and just let the stator hang here. I prefer to pull the stator off and let it hang here than to follow wires all the way up, just to try to, this has to come off anyway to do the motor, so this is gonna have to come off, but these don't have to come apart if I just hang the motor off to the side. And it's just one less thing that I have to worry about. If I disconnect this and reconnect it, now we have a short or something. It's just one less thing to worry about. Anytime I can avoid disconnecting terminals, I try to do that. If it's not too much trouble, I try to keep things connected as much as I can, just to avoid having unexpected issues. So let me remove the stator real quick. Another thing that makes the job convenient is one of these little impact driver for Phillips. You just pop it in here, give it a little bit of twist as you're beating it with a hammer, and it knocks these things right out for you, instead of stripping them out, trying to get a bite on them, get them out. They can be in there pretty tough, and they should be in there pretty tough. You don't want these coming loose on you. I like to use Loctite on them too when I put them back in, because I don't need these things coming loose while I'm out riding and change my timing on me and end up blowing a motor or something. Alright, got all them out, so I'm just gonna, you just help a little rubber piece down here in the bottom, kind of slide that out with your hand as you wiggle the stator out, and you just let it hang off to the side, just like that. It'll be okay, and at least she's still connected and we don't have to worry about any wire issues. So yeah, next thing I'm gonna do is remove this. Grab a punch, get the locking tab up, there we go, and then I'm going to break the rules here and use a silver socket on an impact. Oh, he's got this thing on pretty good. Put it on the next setting, there we go. If I can get this front sprocket out of here, I won't have to remove the chain to get the motor out. Yeah, I'm gonna have to remove the chain. Alright, let me do that. Alright, I think that's everything for this side of the motor. I'm going to go ahead and leave the shifter on. I can pull the motor out with the shifter on and take it. It's just easier than trying to get this. I mean, I can do that, but I'll just leave it on. I can take it out once it's out. Let me get to the other side of the motor now. Not much to do here, just this water hose and the kickstarter. I will remove that and pull the motor out. That thing's pretty bulky, gets in your way, pokes you in the eye and stuff. So let me get them off. Alright, I have them off. Now I'm going to remove the two motor mount bolts. Right here, it's one there and one here. Oh snap, on this side of the motor I forgot all about this thing right here. And same thing, you can follow the wires all the way up and just connect it up there. Or you can just remove it. I think I'll just remove it. Okay, got that off and hanging right there. Had to pull out these two little tabs to hold it in. Make sure you grab this little pin, whatever they call this thing in here. And there's a spring. Oh man, I just dropped it. Let me find, oh there it is. And there's a spring behind it too in the hole here. Make sure you get them out and put them in a safe place so you can, during reassembly, you can put that stuff back in. Gotta get that spring out of there. I'm gonna use the safety wire that I just curled like that. Let's see if that'll work. No, that's not working. Let me try something else. Alright, this little pick is just enough to allow me to get it to stick its head out here. Oop. And push it back in the hole. That's not what I meant to do. There it is. Now I'll just grab some needle nose and pull her out. Okay, now we're going to take the swing arm pivot bolt out. So let me go ahead and take the nut off. Alright. There's a washer behind that. Here we go. Alright, so now we need to knock the swing arm pivot bolt through to the other side. There's two ways to do this. You can either, this is obviously in the way, as you can see, for it to come out. You can either take this off, or you can just come back here and using a flat head, very gently, don't damage the brake pads or anything, but just spread them out a little bit. And that's going to allow you to press this brake down. See, now it clears and you can slide it out as long as you're holding that down. And of course, as you pump it, it will spread these back out. And obviously, make sure you pump the brakes when you're done with this job. You don't want to find out you don't have back brakes when you first get to the track. I'll just use this to punch her through. You don't want to punch her all the way through. You only want to take it to the middle of the left side of the swing arm bearing right there, just to the middle, just enough so you can get the motor out. But at the same time, as long as you don't pop it all the way out, it'll kind of keep the swing arm in line. It'll make it easier when you go to put the motor back in and slide it back in. So let me go ahead and knock this out. Push the brake pedal down. That should be enough right there. So let's see if we can get this motor out now. Alright, I'm hoping to get the motor out without loosening up the radiators and moving them. We're going to find out. It's been a while since I've done one of these. I work on so many bikes, you get them all mixed up after a while, so let's see. Alright, let's see. You know what? Its carburetor's getting in my way here. Unfortunately, I think I am gonna have to remove the subframe and carburetor, make this job a little bit easier. Let me knock that out real quick. Oh wait, maybe not. I was mistaken. She's coming out. Ah, stupid cylinder's getting in the way. All right. Let me rethink this. Okay, I'm just going to remove the cylinder. The cylinder keeps getting caught up on top. So, I mean, I'm sure I can remove a whole bunch of other stuff to get it out. Like take the carburetor off and maybe the radiator's out. But, you know, the cylinder's already got to come off anyway. So let's just remove that. Cover. Then you have the power valve lever here. They give you this little slot to stick a tool in. You can stick, I'm just sticking a small flathead to keep it from spinning the actual lever right here so you don't damage the power valve inside there as you're removing the bolt in the middle here. There we go. And then you just kind of pull this off like that. And yeah, now I'm gonna remove all four of these, 14 millimeters, 2 on this side and 2 on the other side. Well, I tried pulling the cylinder up, but the rod is stuck on the crank in the up position, or in the midway position, and so I can't pull the cylinder up far enough to get it off the piston because of that. This motor has to come out with the cylinder still on, unfortunately. So I'm going to go ahead and continue removing the carburetor and the subframe, and let's just get the motor out. Okay, the subframe's off and the carburetor's hanging up over the frame here. Let's see if we can do it now. Yeah, it looks like we can. Yes, we can. All right. Guess what, guys? I should have did it like that the first time. But it's okay. I work on so many of these. You get them all mixed up after a while. But hopefully you don't make the mistake I did. And I'm making these videos live and unedited, so you're going to see all my little mistakes plus the areas I get it right. So there she is. All right, let's pop that cylinder off now. All right, let's pop her off. I got all the bolts off and stuff. If these are stuck, just give them some love taps with a hammer. Don't try prying them up. You see? Let me get you in here real fast. See how the crank moves with the rod? That little rod bearing is frozen, welded on that crank. So let's go ahead and get the piston off, take a closer look. Oh, I have a visitor here, Joe. He owns 2 YZ250 two-strokes.
03 and 2017.
And how old are you?
65.
And he still rips them. Alright, as you can see, this thing, the little rod bearing, like I mentioned, is stuck on the crank. It's froze up. In my opinion, what caused this is the guy that owns the spike, he's been running 40/1 on its oil ratio, and that's, you know, a little less oil than, let's say, 32/1 that Yamaha recommends. He likes to keep the bike up at the very highest RPMs as he's riding it, like a lot of these young cats do. You hear on these 250Fs always hitting the rev limiter in the air and stuff. That's how he's been riding this, and at that point you really have to run more oil. You know how when you ride a bike real slow, two-stroke, you have to clean it out after a while. Like a slow rider, it might load up and they clean out, because what happens is the carburetor, the air and fuel, goes in here in the cylinder and it gets directed down into the crank here first, where when the piston goes down, it compresses it. When the piston gets far enough down, it passes these little transfer ports right here, and it allows that compressed charge to shoot into the piston area. But while it's in here, it's lubing the crank and also the piston and everything, the crank bearings and everything. So there's what they call migration oil. That's the oil that builds up in here, especially when you ride slow. Usually when you do a top end, if this was free, I'd be able to show you. You can spin the crank and you'll see that oil, it'll pull up oil on these crank halves right here. You'll see some oil cut. That's called your migrating oil or migration oil. And you need a certain amount of that oil in there. Now when you ride slow, it builds up too much, and then when you give it a lot of throttle, all that oil comes in the top end up under the combustion chamber all at once, and that's what causes it to run loaded up, and you have to clean it up. But if you run really fast, you're technically over cleaning it too. If you run the bike at high RPMs and a lot of throttle for too long, you're technically over cleaning out the bike, where you're actually using up all the migration oil in here, and at that point the lower rod bearing can start starving for oil. When it starves for oil, it starts running hot. When it starts running hot, things start expanding. It makes even more friction, and it's like a tractor pull. The more friction, more heat, more friction, more heat, until it melts the bearing. Yamaha suggests 32/1. KTM suggests like 50/1. What's right, what's wrong? I'll tell you, in my opinion, it all depends on the rider. My wife rides a little bit slower. I run 40/1 in her YZ125. I run 32/1. Even though I'm a pretty quick rider, I tend to keep the bike more in its torque peak and not so much revved out on the very tip. So 32/1 works for me. If I was running more at the higher RPMs, or if I was even faster, I would maybe even run 24/1, or maybe even 20/1. The faster you go, or the more you keep it at the higher RPMs, basically, the more you're cleaning this out and keeping it clean from its migration oil, which means you have to run more oil so that you can sustain a decent amount of migrating oil in here to keep this thing from getting stuck, melting the lower rod bearing, getting stuck like this happened. At this point, he claims he's going to start running about 24/1. I told him at least 32/1, man, because your 40/1's not working. And the cylinder looks in good shape. I just checked it out. I mean, it's dirty. I'm going to clean all this stuff up. But this cylinder's not old. He actually had to get a new cylinder for it a while back. So let me go ahead and get this motor ready to split. I'll go ahead and set the motor on this tray right here. So as I start opening up, the remaining oil, even though I have drained oil, the remaining oil that's in it will be caught and not get my rags all oily and stuff. I'm going to go ahead and first remove the clutch cover here. You don't have to take every bolt off. We're not going to be taking the water pump cover off. That one didn't need to come out. Alright, let me pull these out. Okay, some gentle love taps should pop her off. There she is. Alright, now we're going to get the clutch out of there. I know you'll see me using an end pack to take most of this motor apart. However, when it's time to put it back in, you got to be real careful with the end pack, because you can strip stuff out. So when it's time to put everything back together, on a lot of these bolts I'll just be hand tightened. So that oh, duh. There we go. Alright, you always want to, when you pull these apart, I know this one doesn't have any ball bearings in here, but I always stick a magnet in anyway in every motor. You never know, you can forget which motors do and which motors don't, but I know this one don't, but I'm doing it anyway, just for good practice. So there's nothing in there, we're good. Now we have to take that locking tab that holds the clutch in, bend it back down. Let me find the right size socket for this. Alright, I've got the right size socket here. Sometimes the whole clutch assembly will get locked in like this. If you pull just this inner out, you'll see it has a washer here. That has, let me bring it in close here. You see how the washer has these little teeth. They have to be lined up for that to come off. So that's why you almost always have to remove that first. Get the washer out, and then you can take the rest of the basket off. And There it is. Now we can pull the basket off. Oh. There's a bearing that goes on the inside here. We'll be cleaning all of this up when we put it back together. There's a washer on the back side. Always, anytime you remove anything, always check for washers. You don't, you never know. They get stuck back there with the oil on it, with oil. They get stuck on there. You don't know it's there, and then later on you go to move the motor around, washer drops, and you don't know where that washer went, or you might not even see it drop. Next thing I like to do, I already pulled off the shifter lever, so I just want to pop the shift rod out. Remember what I mentioned about washers just now? Look, there's a washer in there for this. So yeah, I'll use my hand to get it out of there. So that's why I always check for washers, because they just stick right on there. You won't even realize they're there. I'll put that on here so I don't forget to put that on during this reassembly. This also has it right here, this little spacer or whatever. So you want to grab that, include that with the shifter lever. All right, next thing I'm going to do is get this main crank gear off. You always want to hold the rod when you use an impact to take these off or on. And some of these are left-hand thread, so it's not left. This one's not. This is normal, but some motors are. So you got to know what you're working on. Hope this goes in the back end there. Always keep these in the order that they came off, so it helps you remember when you go to reassemble it. But some of them have left-handed threads, which means it's not righty-tighty, it's righty-loosey. And it's not lefty-loosey, it's lefty-tighty. So make sure you know which one. All you got to do is look at the torque specs for the motor for this bolt. If right after the torque specs it has a LH, that means it's a left-handed thread. That means you're going to have to turn it right to get it off. But this one's not like that, so I just wanted to bring that up in case you're working on something different. So that's pretty much all we have to remove from this side of the motor to split the cases. We can leave this intact as long as we don't beat it around too much. That'll stay there. And we'll leave this intact. We'll leave that on. We don't have to remove any of this, although for the shifter mod that we're going to be doing during the reassembly, we will be removing this to do the shifter mod, but that's during the reassembly, so we'll get to there in a little bit. And now we have to get all the Allens that hold the cases together out. I'll do that real quick. Of course, you might have an Allen too that's full of dirt like this one is. You just stick an air, blow it out real good. There it is. She's cleaned up. Now I'll be able to get that one out. Yeah, right. That's it. Now we can start thinking about how we're going to split this motor. Oh, before I start all this beating around and everything, you have this keyway here that we have to remove that holds the flywheel on or in line. Get that off before we lose it. There she is. Alright, we got her. Because we're going to need to put that on the new crank. Okay, so there's several ways you can split a motor. One way is to get some really long bolts, put them in some of the holes, and you can tap them with hammers. Put one on this end and one on that, and you can tap them with hammers and split the motor. The other way to do it is the wrong way, which is put flatheads in here and force it apart that way. And then the right way to do it is use case splitters, which we have them, but they take longer to use if you already have, if the motor will split with just some bolts and tapping it. This motor historically is known the first time you take it apart to be very difficult to split when they're a virgin. This one's a virgin, so we're going to try this real quick, but there's a good chance it might not get them to split. Let's hope it does, because I don't want to have to break out the case splitters. Well, I've started to get it to budge a little, but that's about it. Mainly on the back end. It's this crank that sits tight here. That's the one that gives you the hard time. And I'm not going to pound on it too hard. I'm just going to break out the case splitters and let's see if we get some help from them. Oh geez, I hooked this whole case splitter up for no reason. I was sitting here tapping it wouldn't budge. I forgot one of the bolts down here. That's why you don't beat the crap out of them. That's why you double check everything. I'm not even going to use these cumbersome things. Hey, I got these wild chickens here. Chill out, man. Anyway, I'm not even going to use this. I don't like using these unless I got to, especially when this works great. So I'm going to go ahead and pull this back off and continue just using the tapping method with the long bolts. That's just the best way to do it, in my opinion, if you can. Case splitters work when it's stubborn, but this one seems to be budging. Before I even started putting any torque on this, I found that one bolt that I forgot. I gave this bolt a lub tap, the one that's supposed to help push it. Yeah, I already started cracking them, so let me pull that back off. Alright, so back to where we were. Remove the case splitter. Don't need them. This thing's already splitting just by the tapping. Like I said, usually just stick some. You can see this is bent up from, I've done a lot of motors with this, but as long as it's straight from here on, it's good. Put them in, thread them in fully. Got one back here. And what it does is when you tap on this, it will push the side of the case off and out. It basically separates the cases. That's all we're looking to do right now. So let me get. Ooh. I'm going to set this camera up here. Here we go. You just do a little on each side. You can see, I don't know if you can see it in the camera here, but they are slowly splitting. I like to take my fingers and kind of help the split out right here as I'm tapping. That looks like it. Let me go ahead and remove these now, and we'll just continue splitting them by hand. I tell you what, it's a damn good thing I didn't start adding a whole bunch of torque to that case splitter when I was forgetting that one bolt. And that's why I say lub taps. I like using the two long bolts going through to separate, because you only can hit them so hard without them bending. And if it doesn't move, you miss something somewhere most likely. So as always, when you split cases, you look for washers. We're going to go ahead and get this thing out of the way. Sometimes there's a rubber seal in here. I'm not seeing on this. Okay, it's probably on the shaft, the transmission. Yeah, it has one on the transmission shaft, so we're good there. Split this over. Make sure no washers are sitting in here. We don't see any washers there. Check on the cases here too, just so you know what is supposed to be there, or you don't want to lose these. So we got these cases split. Let me go ahead and clean them up. Clean up this workbench a little bit. Get rid of this oil tray and stuff. Oh, before I do that too, let me collect these locating pins, dowel pins, whatever. Make a little pile right there for stuff that I know needs to go in the motor before I try to put them back together. If you can't get it out with a pair of pliers, then just leave it in. It's not going to fall out, so that's okay. And we have this rubber seal right here. It's O-ring. We'll pop that off. So we know this O-ring, and we know that needs to go back in the motor before we put the cases back together. So I will look to that pile when I go to put them back together. Alright, before we clean these cases up, I want to get this old crankshaft out of there. I'm not going to use a press.